Get comfortable. Lay your head on your pillow and let your mind drift back, over 1,000 years ago, to the misty shores of Scandinavia. In the far northern lands, where the winters were long and the stars shimmered over icy fjords, lived a people known as the Vikings. They were farmers and fishermen, but also warriors, explorers, and seafarers. They had a reputation: fierce, fearsome, and unyielding. But tonight, we're not here for battles or shouting. Tonight, we explore their stories quietly, as if whispered by candlelight on a cold night. Let us begin. 1. Ivar the Boneless. A curious name, isn't it? Boneless. No one is quite sure what it means. Some say he had a condition that made his bones weak or soft. Others say he was so flexible and agile in battle, he seemed to have no bones at all. Ivar was a cunning leader. He led the great heathen army to England in the 9th century. Quietly, strategically, he outwitted his enemies and took city after city. But at night, he would sit by the fire, gaze into the flames, and plan patiently, never in haste. 2. Bjorn Ironside. The son of Ragnar Lothbrok, Bjorn earned his name for being nearly impossible to wound in battle. Ironside, as though his sides were forged of steel. But he was also a voyager. He sailed beyond the seas, to the coasts of France, even down to the Mediterranean. Imagine the gentle rocking of his long ship at night, the sound of the water slapping against the hull, the stars above, endless and quiet, the creak of the wooden boards beneath his feet. Bjorn was not only a warrior, he was a dreamer of distant lands. 3. Egil Skallagrimsson. A poet and a berserker. Egil was known for his wild rage in battle, but also for his haunting poetry. He once wrote a sorrowful verse for his dead son, so beautiful it brought tears to the eyes of hardened men. He fought with fury, but his heart was deep. Perhaps, at the end of the day, even Egil sat in silence, staring out into the cold wind, thinking of home, and of the people he had loved. 4. Harald Hardrada. The last great Viking king. Harald traveled far. He was a mercenary in Constantinople, a commander in foreign wars, and finally, King of Norway. He returned to England in 1066, dreaming of conquest, but he met his end at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. He was tall, proud, and regal. But tonight, we remember him not as a warrior, but as an old man dreaming of his youth, the sound of oars in the water, the warm laughter of his men, and the golden glow of torchlight flickering in the dark. And so, the most terrifying Viking warriors, once bold, brutal, and brilliant, now fade into the gentle quiet of history. Their swords are rust. Their ships are buried. But their stories drift through the wind like soft lullabies from the north. So close your eyes. Let the sound of the sea carry you. The Vikings have gone to sleep. And so shall you. The fire crackles. The wind brushes through pine trees. In the distance, you can hear the soft lapping of waves against rock. The North remembers many names, some feared, some forgotten. But all now lie beneath snow and soil. Tonight, more tales rise from the sagas, like mist from the fjord, Lagertha, the shield maiden of the North. Before her name echoed through modern retellings, Lagertha lived in legend. A warrior woman, fierce with sword and brave of heart. She once rode into battle with her golden hair flying behind her, like fire against a cold gray sky. The men who fought beside her swore she was no ordinary warrior. She moved with purpose. Her shield, rimmed with iron, bore the scars of 100 clashes. Yet after battle, she would remove her armor slowly, carefully, and tend to the wounded. Her strength was not just in war, but in calm. Some say she was once the wife of Ragnar Lothbrok, that their love burned hot but ended cold. Still, she led her own armies, ruled in her own name. Imagine her now, riding a horse across snow-dusted hills, the breath of the beast steaming in the winter air, her eyes focused not on glory but peace. 6. Eric the Red, the Exile. They called him Red not just for the fire of his hair, but for the fire of his temper. Eric was banished from Norway and then Iceland for killing men in disputes. But he was not broken.
No.
He set sail west, beyond where anyone dared go. And what he found was Greenland, a land of ice, of rock, of mystery. He called it green to lure others. Clever, bold, dangerous. Eric built a home there, cold, stone-walled, warmed by smoke and silence. He walked the cliffs alone sometimes, staring at the great dark sea. What did he see in those black waves? Regret? Or simply possibility? They say his son would one day go even farther. 7. Freydis, Eric's daughter, the fierce daughter. Daughter of Eric, sister to Leif Erikson. But she did not live in their shadows. Freydis was part of the voyage to Vinland, the lands we now call North America. When their small camp was attacked by native warriors, most of the men ran. But Freydis, heavily pregnant, barefoot in the morning dew, grabbed a fallen sword. She screamed a war cry so terrifying, so blood-chilling, that the attackers fled. Was it true? Was it embellished? It matters little. The saga says it happened. That she stood alone among the trees, eyes blazing, blade in hand. Later, her stories would be buried beneath the sagas of kings and jarls. But now, in the hush of sleep, we remember her. 8. Leif Erikson, the explorer. Not terrifying in the way of blood or war, but in daring. Leif, the son of Eric the Red, looked westward with curiosity and courage. He set out across the treacherous North Atlantic, guided by stars, wind, and whispers. And he found land. Trees, rivers, fish, grapes growing wild. He called it Vinland. Leif did not conquer it. He studied it, lived within it, shared with it. A different kind of Viking. A man more scholar than slayer. He lit fires on the shore, built shelters with his crew, slept under a sky utterly unfamiliar. The wind brought new scents, pine, earth, and something more, the smell of the unknown. Tonight, as you drift toward dreams, imagine his ship swaying softly on those new waters. Wooden beams creaking. The stars above, bright and endless. 9. Aud the deep-minded. A widow, a mother, a traveler. After her husband died in battle, Aud took her household to Iceland. Not as a helpless refugee, but as a leader. She built ships. She commanded loyalty. She settled a large part of Iceland and became known for her wisdom. Her nickname, Deep-Minded, suggests not only intelligence but calm, reflection, thoughtfulness in a world of chaos. She freed her slaves. She gave land to her kin. And when she died, she was buried upright, seated, in a ship-shaped grave, as if she were still looking outward, past the waves. And still, the sagas are not done. More names whisper through the wind. Some terrible, some gentle, all part of the long night's tale. Tonight, you have met warriors and poets, kings and wanderers, women who roared, men who wept, and souls who drifted beyond known maps. The Viking world was not all blood and war. It was also firelight, laughter, long winter nights, songs carried on the sea. The fire burns low now. The sails have dropped. The warriors lay down their arms. And so do you. Let your thoughts be still. Let the cold wind pass you by. Sleep comes like fog over the fjord. Tomorrow, more sagas will be told. But tonight, the Vikings sleep. And you sleep with them. The North never sleeps, not truly. Even in the stillest winter nights, the stars hum with old songs. The snow falls, slow and steady, like ash from ancient fires. And in the frozen ground lie the bones of men and women who once shaped the world with axe and sail. So lay back. Let the wind of centuries pass over you. The longboats drift again and new voices call from the past. 10. Rollo, the walker. He was so large that none could match him in size or strength. They called him Rollo the Walker because no horse could carry him. A man of towering stature and terrifying skill in battle. Born in Norway, Rollo was exiled. But he did not fade into obscurity. Instead, he sailed south and came to the coasts of France. There, he led raids so fearsome that the king of the Franks offered him land and title to stop. Rollo accepted. He converted to Christianity, married a French princess, and founded what would become Normandy. Yet one wonders, did he ever miss the cold winds of the north? Did he dream of snowy forests, of howling wolves and longships lit by moonlight? Even as a duke, even in gold-threaded robes, perhaps he still remembered the salty sting of sea spray and the iron weight of his axe. 11. Sigurd the Snake in the Eye. Another son of Ragnar. Sigurd was named for a strange mark in his eye, said to resemble the image of a coiled serpent. He was fierce, vengeful, and intelligent. He fought with his brothers Ivar and Bjorn to avenge their father's death. Together, they struck fear into England and Francia. But unlike others, Sigurd did not vanish into legend so easily. He ruled. He judged. He wrote law and order into the chaos of the Viking world. A warrior, yes, but also a builder of futures. What did he see when he looked in the mirror? A snake? A symbol of fate? Or merely a reminder that he was not like the others? Even in sleep, perhaps his eye watched the stars, unblinking, waiting. 12. Skogultosti, the Grave Dancer. Little is known of him, but his name is whispered in the old sagas. Skogultosti was not a king or a jarl. He was a berserker. Some say he carved runes into his own flesh before battle. Some say he laughed, as he fought 5 men alone and won. But after the battle, he would walk among the dead. Not to loot, not to weep, but to dance. Slowly, softly, in rhythm with the wind. His name means Tosti of the Valkyrie. It is said he believed the Valkyries watched him dance, and would one day carry him to Valhalla. It may sound terrifying, but perhaps it was peace, in its own strange way. A dance in honor of the fallen. A rhythm for the end of days. 13. Odin of the Deep Fjord. A quiet man, not often mentioned in the great epics. But his terror came not in shouts or swords, but in silence. Odin was known to sail alone, through storms that made others turn back. He spoke little. He drank less. He killed only when necessary and never without cause. But when he did, there were no survivors. The stories say his ship was black. His sails were dark as ravens. And no oar touched water when he glided through the fjords at night. A ghost? A man? Or something in between? None could say. But to this day, in the far north of Iceland, there are those who swear they see a shadow on the water in winter. A long, black ship with no crew. And no sound. 14. Gunhild, Mother of Kings. Not a warrior in the usual sense, but terrifying all the same. Gunhild was the wife of Eirik Bloodaxe. She was beautiful, sharp-witted, and, according to some, trained in Seer, Norse magic. She was called Mother of Kings because her sons ruled much of Norway. But many feared her. Feared her words, her influence, her gaze. They said she could poison a man with a whisper, curse a warrior with a look. And yet she loved fiercely, protected her children, advised her husband with wisdom and strength. Terrifying? Yes. But in the way a storm is terrifying, because it is wild, powerful, and impossible to ignore. Gunhild did not swing a sword, but history bent around her all the same. The fire crackles low now. The storm has passed. The ships are moored. And you are drifting. The Vikings were not just warriors. They were dreamers, builders, mothers, dancers, kings, exiles. Their stories, terrible and beautiful, are long as the night, deep as the sea, and soft as snow on a quiet roof. Let your breath slow. Let your body soften. Close your eyes. There are still more sagas to tell. But for now, the wind grows still. The gods do not speak. The axe sleeps beside the bed. And so do you. The air grows colder now. The waters of the fjord lie still, glassy and dark, reflecting the light of a pale moon. Somewhere, a raven calls. Once, then vanishes into the night. The Vikings are at rest, but not forgotten. Let us return to the sagas once more. 15. Eirik Bloodaxe, the Crimson King. A name like a wound. Bloodaxe. Eirik was the son of Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway. And like his father, Eirik sought unity through blade and fire. He killed many of his brothers one by one until only he remained as heir. It was not uncommon among Viking royalty, but still, the blood he spilled was heavy. He ruled Norway briefly, then was cast out. Later, he became king of Northumbria, in the cold lands of England. but enemies circled him like wolves. His end came on a lonely battlefield, betrayed, ambushed, and remembered only by the red spray of his axe. Yet there are tales that his ghost wanders the cliffs of York, searching, always searching. And in the hush of winter, they say if you listen carefully near the coast, you can hear iron footsteps and the soft dragging of a blade across stone. 16. Thorkel the Tall, the Gentle Giant. He stood head and shoulders above the others, a mountain of a man. His presence on the battlefield was enough to send shivers through whole armies. But Thorkel was not reckless. No, he was kind. He offered protection to those who surrendered. He laughed with children. He listened and learned, and often spared when others would not. Still, when he fought, it was as if Thor himself had descended with hammer and wrath. He led Viking forces into England, but later switched sides, offering his sword to the very people he once attacked. A complicated man, a terrifying warrior, and, in his later years, something of a peacemaker. History forgets that, but we remember it now, together, in the stillness of the night. 17. Sven Forkbeard, the Relentless. Father of King Nut, son of King Harald Bluetooth. Sven rebelled against his father, overthrew him, became king of Denmark, then took Norway, and finally conquered England. 3 crowns. 1 man. His beard, they say, split like a fork, wild and twisted like the paths of his campaigns. His armies came in waves. He never stopped. Not for peace, not for treaties. His ships haunted the English coasts like dark birds of omen. And yet, his end came quietly. On a cold winter's night in 1014, in the middle of his English conquest, Sven went to sleep and never woke. No blade, no poison, just silence. Perhaps the gods had seen enough. 18. Nut the Great, the sea king who whispered to the tide. Not terrifying by rage, but by ambition. Nut inherited his father's dream and made it real. He ruled Denmark. He ruled Norway. He ruled England. He was calm, deliberate, ruthless when needed, but wise. There is a tale, famous now, where Nut set his throne on the shore and commanded the tide to halt. Of course, the sea did not obey. That was his point. He turned to his courtiers and said, "Let all men know how empty is the power of kings, for no one is worthy of the name, save him by whose will heaven, earth, and the sea obey." Was that story true? Maybe not. Maybe it was a lesson written long after. But imagine it now, a king sitting still, the waves rising to touch his feet, and the wind carrying his quiet words over the dark, endless water. 19. Håkon Sigurdsson, the Shadow of the North. Håkon Jarl ruled Norway during a time of change. He was a pagan lord, resisting the rise of Christianity. He worshipped the old gods, sacrificed to Odin, held blots in secret groves beneath moonlit skies. He was feared for his devotion, feared for his cunning, feared because no one quite knew where his loyalties lay. When the tide turned against him, he fled into hiding, betrayed by a thrall, found in a pigsty, killed with no glory, no ceremony. And yet his name lingers. The old rituals he tried to preserve linger. There are still forests in Norway where people speak of Håkon in hushed voices, where the moss grows thick and the gods still watch. 20. Stiklestad, where the old ways died. Not a person, but a place. A battlefield. A turning point. It was here, in 1030, that King Olaf Haraldsson died. He had once been a Viking raider, then became a Christian king. His death marked the end of the old Viking age. The sagas say the sky went black at noon, that wolves were seen circling, that Odin himself turned his face away. Olaf was later made a saint. His blood watered the land, and from it, churches grew. But in the earth beneath Stiklestad, the old bones sleep. Swords rust, gods whisper, and the wind never quite stops. And now, the night deepens. The fire burns low once more. The sagas fall into silence. You have heard the names of warriors, kings, witches, wanderers, all terrifying in their time, all gone now, but not forgotten. They drift, like your thoughts, on the dark sea of sleep. Quietly,
Gently.
without fear. Your breath slows. The ship of your mind floats softly. No storms. No battle horns. Only calm and stillness. Until the next part of the saga. Part 5, Fire in the Ice, Death in the Fog. You are wrapped in warmth now. You're safe. The sea is far away, and the sword has been set down. But in the softest corners of your mind, the story goes on. The wind still carries whispers from the north, names heavy with fear, mystery, and fate. These were warriors, yes, but also wanderers in the deep snow of history. 21. Harold Fairhair, the first king. He was young when he took his vow. A beautiful girl named Gyda told him she would not marry him unless he became the king of all Norway, not just of a few valleys or scattered clans. So Harold made a promise, and swore he would not cut or comb his hair until he had united the whole land. 10 years passed. War after war. Battle after battle. Brother against brother. Ice melted to blood, and hills echoed with the clang of steel. And at last he won. King of all Norway. Then, and only then, he cut his long, tangled hair, golden, wild, and matted from a decade of war. He became Harold Fairhair, a name of legend. But when the noise faded, when peace finally came, did he miss the storm? Did he dream, in his quiet hall, of the days when he had no crown, only a blade and the wind? 22. Jarl Eirik of Lade, the Whisperer. Not all who terrified did so with swords. Jarl Eirik, ruler of Lade, was a master of quiet control. Where others roared, he spoke softly. Where others charged, he waited. He played kings against each other. Aligned with the Danes, then the Norwegians, then the Swedes. He is remembered not for his battles, but for surviving them. Some say he carried a charm made from the tooth of a draugr, a Norse undead. Others say he knew the names of the gods the priests would not speak aloud. He never needed to shout. His enemies often destroyed themselves. And those who tried to unseat him found their fortunes suddenly changed. 23. Gorm the Old, the Sleeper King. The first historical king of Denmark. A man of deep silence and slow rage. He ruled in the early 900s, when the lines between myth and history were still blurred. Gorm slept on a bed of oak and fir, and when he woke to bad news, his rage was like winter, quiet, endless, and cold. He built the first great burial mounds of his people, covering his dead in stone and earth. When his son died in a foreign land, Gorm built a runestone that still stands today. No statue, no scream, just stone, etched with grief. That stone is called the Gelling Stone. They say if you run your fingers across the Old Norse script, the sorrow still hums beneath your skin. 24. Halfdan the Black, father of a legend. Before Harold Fairhair, there was Halfdan. He ruled the lands of Vestfold. A tall man, strong, but known best for his strange death. One night, he rode across a frozen lake. The ice cracked. His horse plunged. So did he. When his body was recovered, his people fought over where to bury him. Not in anger, but in honor. They split his body into 4 parts, and each part was buried in a different district, so all might share in his spirit. A terrifying act of devotion. A burial unlike any other. Even in death, Halfdan ruled. 25. Sigrid the Haughty, the queen who burned kings. She was a queen of Sweden. Beautiful.
Proud.
Intelligent. When King Olaf Tryggvason of Norway asked her to marry him, he demanded she abandon the Old Norse gods and convert to Christianity. She refused. So he slapped her across the face. She stared at him, cold, unshaken. Later, 2 kings came to court her. She invited them into her hall, gave them food,
Drink.
and then she burned them alive while they slept. Sigrid the Haughty, they called her after that. A name of fire and frost. A queen who bowed to no one. History feared her. But now, she sleeps beneath snow and legend. The sky is darker now. Even the stars seem quieter. The sagas grow heavier, older, and more dreamlike. We do not remember these people because they were perfect. We remember them because they were mighty. Because they shook the world, then vanished. Now their names drift like snowflakes across the endless sea. You can almost see them if you close your eyes. A black sail on the horizon, a golden-haired queen beside a stone fire, a rune carved into a tree. The stories go on, like the tide. But for now, your thoughts are light. Your breath is slow. The battle is over. And you sleep in peace. Part 6. The Wind Whispers of Old Warriors. Some names are shouted across centuries. Others barely heard. But all meant something once. So tonight, let us wander deeper into the mists of Norse memory. Into the frozen hills and forgotten longships. Into the places where even ravens dare not speak too loudly. Here come more warriors. More queens. More shadows. 26. Olaf Tryggvason, the Flame of the Cross. He was born in exile, raised among the Kievan Rus, baptized in a foreign land. And when he returned to Norway, it was not with songs or treaties, but fire. Olaf brought Christianity to the north with iron and ash. Temples to Thor were burned. Priests of Odin were hunted. He was fierce, convicted, unrelenting, but not without contradiction. He built churches. He banned blood sacrifices. And yet, he fought like a man possessed when threatened. His end came at the Battle of Svolder, a naval ambush. Surrounded, outnumbered, cornered. Rather than surrender, he leapt from his ship into the sea and vanished beneath the waves. Some say he drowned. Others say he escaped. And still others say he waits. 27. Ragnar Lodbrok, the Eternal Question. His name is half legend, half truth. Ragnar, hairy breeches, was said to wear trousers of animal hide dipped in tar to protect his legs from serpent venom. He raided Paris, attacked Northumbria, married shield maidens, and bore many sons. But what is real? Historians argue. Was he one man or many? Was he a myth made to explain his sons? Was he a tale told by firelight to frighten enemies? What we do know is this. A man calling himself Ragnar was captured in England. He was thrown into a pit of snakes. And as he died, he laughed. Laughing, they say, because he knew his sons would come and burn the land in vengeance. 28. Styrbjorn the Strong, the Fallen Challenger. Nephew of the Swedish king. Raised in royal halls. But ambition burned in him. He wanted more. Always more. Denied the throne, he gathered an army of outlaws and exiles. Formed the legendary Vikings, a band of warrior mercenaries who followed no king and feared no death. Styrbjorn sailed to Uppsala, the heart of Sweden. He made war on his uncle. But the gods had other plans. At the Battle of Fyrisvellir, Styrbjorn was defeated. His army broken. He died sword in hand, eyes on the sky, waiting for a Valkyrie to descend.
He did not win.
But he was remembered. Sometimes, that's all a Viking wanted. 29. Hastian, the trickster of the south. He sailed far. Farther than most.
To Spain.
To Italy. To the warm lands beyond the reach of snow. Hastian was clever, not just cruel. At one siege, he pretended to be dead. His men carried him into the city in a coffin, claiming to want a Christian burial. The gates opened, and Hastian rose from the coffin with a sword in hand. The city fell. He laughed often, fought fiercely, and when his hair turned white, he simply kept sailing. His enemies feared his cleverness more than his blade. And in the long silence of the southern night, his ships vanished into the mist. 30. Kettle Flatnose, the Exile King. He ruled the Isles, Scotland, the Hebrides, the coastlines where Norse and Celtic blood mingled. They called him Flatnose not because of injury, but because his face showed no fear, no pride, no expression. He was calm, terrible in anger, but careful in peace. When his daughter was dishonored, he left court and land behind. He took his people across the sea to Iceland. There, he started again. New soil, new gods, new silence. He built homes out of driftwood, planted seeds in volcanic ash, watched snow fall where once there had been smoke. He died quietly, but his line lived on for generations. Now, the night is long indeed. The stories grow quieter, like the echo of an axe deep in the forest. You have heard of queens who burn kings, of tricksters in coffins, of men who leapt into the sea rather than kneel. Their time is done. Yours, too, is coming for sleep, that is. Your mind settles. Your breath softens. And all these voices from the past, these terrifying warriors, fade into peace. The sea is calm. The sails are down. The stars are watching. And you are safe. Art 7. Wounds of ice, dreams of fire. The long night stretches on. You are wrapped in warmth. Outside, the fjords are frozen. The wind combs gently through pine trees. But here, in this dream, we drift with longships and legends, quiet, steady, and deep. Tonight, 5 more warriors rise from the mists of history, each terrifying, each extraordinary. 31. Ivar Vidfam, the All-Ruler. A shadowy king of the early sagas. His name means wide-fathoming, as if he saw farther than others or ruled farther. He was said to be the king of not just Sweden, but Denmark, Saxony, and even parts of England and Ireland. A weaver of alliances. A bringer of war. They say he poisoned his own daughter when she disobeyed him, and that when he died, he sailed west alone. He set out in a single ship with no crew, seeking death in the deep. Did he find it, or does his ship still sail, cursed to never land? Some say on foggy nights, you can see a lone sail drifting silently along the coast. No oars, no lanterns, only a king who could not stop seeking. 32. Vanikessen. The boy who would not wait was just 12 when he begged to join the Jomsvikings, that secretive brotherhood of elite Norse warriors. They laughed at him, but he challenged the best of them to a duel and won. By 15, he led men into battle. He had a code. He did not retreat. He did not beg. He did not flinch. At the Battle of Hjörungavagr, many of his brothers were captured and sentenced to death. But Van stood tall. He mocked his executioners. And then, the axe was lifted and stopped. The enemy commander, so impressed, spared Van's life. He lived, fought again, but was never truly safe. His fearlessness terrified even his friends. Some men die quickly. Others live, with fire in their veins. Van was one of those. 33. Helgi the Lean Between Gods. A strange man. Helgi lived in Iceland, in a time when the old gods were fading and the white Christ was rising. He believed in both. Prayed to Thor for land and strength. Prayed to Christ for mercy and guidance. Neither god owned him. He built his house facing the mountains, said the spirits there were still watching. He sacrificed one day and attended mass the next. His enemies called him mad, but no one could best him in a fight. Helgi was terrifying because no one knew where his loyalty lay, not to gods, not to kings, not even to the world. He walked alone through misty valleys and was never quite seen by daylight. 34. Brynhild, the Sleeping Flame. More than a woman. A Valkyrie. A symbol. A dream. Brynhild was cursed by Odin, put to sleep behind a wall of fire for defying his will. She slept in armor. She slept with a sword in her hand. And only the bravest man could wake her. Many tried. Only one succeeded, Sigurd. But their love was tragic. Deception followed. Brynhild felt betrayed. She burned herself alive on a funeral pyre with Sigurd's body beside her. Yet the sagas say she still rides among the clouds, spear in hand, choosing the slain. When the wind howls at night, some say it is Brynhild's horse galloping across the stars. She was terrifying not in rage but in sorrow. A woman who loved with such fire, even death could not contain her. 35. Jarl Sigvaldi, the Oathbreaker. He ruled the Jomsvikings after Van. But where Van was brave, Sigvaldi was cunning. He once lured King Olaf Tryggvason into an ambush at sea, promising peace, then delivering war. Olaf was outnumbered, surrounded. He fought bravely. But Sigvaldi sailed away, his promise broken, his hands clean. He let others do the killing. He was not feared for his sword. He was feared for his smile, for the way he said, "You have my word," just before betrayal. Even the fiercest Viking knew. A blade you can face, but a whisper? That can destroy you in the dark. And now, the tale grows quiet again. The warriors return to their graves. The shields are hung. The ships are pulled up from the tide, their hulls resting gently on frost-hardened ground. You've walked among legends. Kings who vanished into the sea, berserkers who laughed at death, queens who burned down thrones, and boys who rose before their time. But the sagas never end. They stretch onward, slow as glaciers, silent as snowfall. So breathe. Let your thoughts drift like ash on the wind. Sleep like a longhouse in winter. And dream of old warriors, now still, now at peace. Part 8. The ones who did not die quietly. Time does not end in the Viking world. It simply folds, like snow upon snow. More names rise from the ice. Not all are kings. Not all are remembered rightly. But all were feared. And now, you will know them too. Let them pass gently, like a ship in fog. 36. Thorstein the Red, the half-remembered conqueror. His mother was Udi the Deep-Minded, wise and solemn. His father was Olaf the White, a warrior king of Dublin. And Thorstein inherited both fates, blood and mind, fire and calm. He sailed to Scotland, young and hungry. One by one, he conquered the north. His enemies fled or bowed. His name sent shivers through glens and valleys. But ambition has teeth. One day, his allies turned against him, cut him down. No saga records his final words, only that he died in silence, far from home, and that the mountains where he fell still bear no flowers, only stone. 37. Hrolfr Kraki, the good king with bloody roots. A warrior king of Denmark, known for fairness and generosity. But his story is bathed in red. He came from a cursed family, sons murdering fathers, mothers marrying uncles. His uncle killed his father. His mother married the killer. And Hrolfr, born in the aftermath, grew up to be the opposite of all of them.
Kind. Wise.
Yet when threatened, he could still become terror itself. He once scattered gold behind him while fleeing a battle, not to lighten his load, but to slow his enemies. They stopped to gather the coins. He escaped. Clever. Graceful.
Deadly.
His hall was burned in betrayal. He died with sword in hand. A king of light, born from dark. 38. Kettle Trout, the giant fisher. Yes.
Trout.
A name more gentle than others. But do not be fooled. Kettle was a warrior of Norway, large and strong. A bear of a man. He killed berserkers with his bare hands. Wrestled giants. Fought sea serpents in the dark ocean. He was called Trout, not for gentleness, but because no one could catch him. When enemies thought they had him cornered, he slipped through streams of fate like a fish through water. He laughed easily, loved deeply, and when he died, it was said he sank into the sea by choice. His sword resting across his chest, eyes open, still waiting to rise again. 39. Gunhildr Konungamir, the Witch Queen. Gunhildr, wife of Eirik Bloodaxe, mother of kings, mistress of spells. She studied seer, magic of the old ways, learned from two dark sisters in a cave, deep in the mountains of Finnmark. Her enemies accused her of curses, said she could wither crops, rot teeth, turn men to madness with a glance. And yet she ruled. She protected her sons fiercely, sat beside thrones, not behind them. They said she bathed in blood. Maybe. They said she whispered to wolves.
Possibly.
But she survived longer than most Viking women. And when she vanished from the records, no one knew where she'd gone. Some say she still walks, cloaked and hooded, between the trees in Norway, humming to herself in the old tongue. 40. Egil One Hand, the blade that would not stop. He lost his right hand in a duel. He should have died. Instead, he tied a blade to the stump with leather straps and taught himself to fight again, left-handed, quick, brutal. His enemies laughed once. Only once. They said his eyes never blinked, even in storms. Said he fought like a man possessed. They say he killed 20 in one raid, then sat beside the fire-eating fish, humming softly, as though nothing had happened. He was not noble, not royal, just relentless. He vanished in his 40s. Some think he drowned at sea. Others say he walked into the forest with his sword arm still strapped, looking for one more battle that never came. Now the candle is nearly gone. The night is heavy. You have walked among kings with blood on their brows, queens with curses in their hands, and wild-eyed warriors who would not fall. But you are safe here. No axes swing. No sails rise. Only breath. Only quiet. The sagas are soft now. Almost gone. You are far from war. Far from fear. Let the snow fall. Let the dreams come. The fire is low. The ship has landed. You are not in battle. You are in peace. And you are asleep. Part 9. Blades of Shadow. Hearts of Stone. The snow deepens outside. Wind moves through the pine trees like an old song. You are not cold. You are not afraid. You are wrapped in peace, though the names we speak were once born in flame. These were warriors who carved their lives into the bones of the world. But now they sleep. And so will you. 41. Rolf Ganger, the giant who became a duke. In Norway, they called him Gangerolf, or Rolf the Walker, because he was so tall that no horse could carry him. He walked everywhere, into battle, into legend, and eventually into Normandy. There, he became Rollo, leader of Norse settlers, founder of a dynasty. The Franks feared him, but they also offered him land, if he would protect them from other Vikings. He agreed, and became the first Duke of Normandy. But the old ways never left him. He ruled like a Norse jarl, with law and steel and silence. It is said that when he died, his ship was buried in secret. Its prow still points north, just in case. 42. Skallagrim, the Iron Poet, a blacksmith, a warrior, and father to Egil Skallagrimson, the most famous Viking poet of all. Skallagrimr had strength beyond reason, said to bend metal with his hands, break bones with one blow. But he rarely spoke. When his brother died, he did not cry. He forged a blade in silence, then went out into the woods and did not return until the snow was red. Later in life, he settled in Iceland, built his hall near a waterfall. He aged, but never softened. His hands always smelled of soot. His gaze never lifted. He was terrifying not because he raged, but because he never had to. 43. Starker the Old, the cursed hero. He lived 3 lifetimes, fought in hundreds of battles, served many kings, and was both loved and hated by the gods. Odin blessed him with skill in war, but Thor cursed him with misery. Every time he tried to do good, something dark followed. He killed a king he once swore to protect. He betrayed a friend to obey his lord. And in the end, he begged to die. But death would not come. He wandered, older than old, covered in scars and sorrow. And in some stories, he still wanders. A ghost with a broken oath, searching for an end that never arrives. 44. Rear the Hound, the Silent Teeth. They said he never barked orders. He never shouted, never raised his voice. But in battle, his mouth was always curled in a slight smile. Rear wore the pelts of wolves and moved with uncanny speed. He came from the dark woods of inland Norway, no known father, no known home. His blade was curved, his shield carved with a symbol of Fenrir, the world-ending wolf. When he led raids, no warning came. Only the sudden howl of wind, and then silence. Villages emptied. Doors left swinging. His ship had no name. Only teeth painted along its prow. A warning, or perhaps a promise. 45. Aslog, the Queen from Ashes. Daughter of the legendary Brynhild and Sigurd the Dragon Slayer. Raised in hiding. Found in a harp. She married Ragnar Lodbrok and bore him famous sons, Ivar, Bjorn, Sigurd. But Aslog was more than a mother. She was a vulva, a seeress. A woman who saw fate and fire in dreams, in the bones of fish. Some feared her, called her witch, said she cursed enemies with her words alone. But she led her people wisely. When Ragnar doubted her, she proved him wrong. When he left her, she raised warriors. And when he died, she did not mourn with tears, but with silence. Her revenge was not loud. It was long and final. And now, the fire is a low amber glow. The world outside is hushed. You've walked among giants again, Giants who once burned cities, shattered armies, bent the will of kings. But now they are memories. Quiet as snow on pine. Still as a burial mound at midnight. The sagas are not over. They never are. But tonight they rest. And so do you. Breathe slowly. Close your eyes. The warriors have all gone home. Part 10. The Cold Crown. The Warm Grave. The sagas never end. They move like rivers beneath frozen ice. You cannot always see them, but they are always there, whispering stories of warriors who stood alone, kings who never wept, and women whose silence ended empires.
Close your eyes now.
We return to the north. 46. Olaf Geirstadulf, the elf king of the mound. He was a king of Vestfold, a quiet one. He died long before the age of great raids, long before dragons filled the sails of long ships. But his story lingered, for after death, he was buried in a great mound, sword, shield, and all. And they say he did not rest. Many winters later, another child was born nearby, weak, pale, barely breathing. And in a dream, Olaf appeared to the boy's father, saying, "Break open my mound. Take my sword. Give it to the child."
He did.
The sword saved the boy. The boy grew up to be Saint Olaf, the most famous king in Norwegian history. Some say the first Olaf never died. He simply waited until his sword was needed. 47. Aud the Deep-Minded, the widow who built a world. Her husband died fighting in Ireland. Her son, Thorstein the Red, tried to conquer Scotland and was betrayed. Aud gathered what was left of her family, her slaves, her wealth, and set sail, quietly, steadily, to Iceland. She didn't mourn with tears. She mourned with action. She built a great longhouse. She gave land to her people. She freed her slaves and gave them homes. A Christian in a pagan land, a woman in a world of men, she ruled with calm, terrifying grace. When she died, she asked to be buried upright in the tide-swept shore, facing the sea, as though watching for what came next. 48. Hastian, the trickster of fire and faith. No one raided quite like Hastian. He sailed with Bjorn Ironside, raided France, Spain, even Italy. And once, he tricked his way into a walled city by pretending to be dead. His men carried him in a coffin, weeping, claiming he had converted to Christianity and deserved a proper burial. The gates were opened. The coffin was placed in the church. Then, Hastian sat up.
Alive.
Sword in hand, they sacked the city. And yet he was not hated. He was respected, because even terror, when wrapped in cleverness, becomes legend. And legend? That never dies. 49. Lager, the shield maiden of the storm. She fought beside Ragnar Lodbrok. She led armies. She killed men with her bare hands. But her story began in horror, when she was taken by an enemy, imprisoned and humiliated. She escaped, built herself into something no one expected. A warrior with golden hair and a heart full of iron. When Ragnar came to her, she saved him, fought for him, married him, then left him, when he doubted her strength. Later, she ruled in Norway, led her own fleet. And in some tales, when old age came, she chose not to fade, but to fall in battle, as a Viking should. 50. Kveldulf Jalfason, the wolf in the daylight. His name meant evening wolf, because it was said that as night fell, something inside him changed.
Calm by day.
Feral by dusk. A berserker, yes, but not one who howled. One who brooded, waited, watched. His son was Skallagrimr. His grandson was Egil Skallagrimson. But Kveldulf? He was the beginning. When King Harald Fairhair demanded his loyalty, Kveldulf refused. He died soon after. But even in death, his fury lingered. His sons sailed with his coffin to Iceland. And when the sea grew wild, they cast his body into the waves, and it sailed itself ashore. A sign that even death obeyed the evening wolf. Now, the candle flickers. The wood crackles in the hearth. You have heard of kings and queens, of witches and wolves, of shield maidens and tricksters, of sailors who could not die and ghosts who would not leave. But they are only stories now. Soft stories. Slow stories. Stories that carry you gently into sleep. So, let go of the sword. Let go of the shield. Let go of the world. The Vikings are resting. So too should you. Part 11. Fire in the ice. Blood in the snow. The world remembers conquerors. But the North remembers something colder. Those who endured. Those who bled in silence. Those whose stories were too heavy for the skalds to sing by firelight. These warriors were terrifying not because they shouted, but because they never needed to. Their silence was thunder. Let us meet them now. 51. Eirik Bloodaxe, the son of a king, the scourge of a kingdom. He was a son of King Harald Fairhair, the first king of all Norway. But Eirik wanted more than a throne. He wanted all of them. And so he killed his brothers, one by one, to be king alone. His axe earned its name in those years. But the Norse feared him, not only for his violence, but for his cold calculation, for how quiet his rage was, how swift his betrayal. Eventually, even the blood-drenched throne turned against him. He was exiled, became king of York for a time. Then, ambushed, betrayed, he died on a battlefield far from home. And yet his name lived, because no one forgot the sound of an axe in snow. 52. Sigrid the Haughty, the flame behind the throne. She was Queen of Sweden, and many sought her hand in marriage. Kings sent gifts. Princes sent promises. But when one suitor mocked her for not converting to Christianity, she had him burned alive in his own long hall. She called it justice. Later, she told King Olaf Tryggvason, convert or leave. He chose to leave. So she united her enemies, married a rival king, and made war against him instead. Her mind was her blade. Her silence was her storm. They say she sat at the edge of battlefields without flinching, her hands folded, her eyes dry. No warrior ever called her soft. They only called her queen. 53. Geirmund Helgerskin, the man with the death skin. They said he was born with skin as pale as the dead. Some called him cursed. Others called him blessed by Hel, the goddess of death. But Geirmund rose quickly.
Smart. Cold.
Brutally effective. He became a sea king, raiding as far as the White Sea, ruling a fleet of shadowed ships. His warriors painted their sails black and never sang. He settled in Iceland, but was never tame. He kept multiple wives, many slaves, fought fiercely to protect what was his. And when age finally took him, his body was laid in a boat filled with weapons and gold. Then set adrift, not burned, because even fire feared him. 54. Huveyr, the daughter of the dead. She was born after her father died. But her father was not just any man. He was Angantyr, wielder of Turfing, a cursed sword that could never be unsheathed without killing. Huveyr was raised by strangers, dressed as a boy, and became a warrior before she became a woman. When she learned of her father's sword, she traveled to his burial island at night. Alone. She stood on his barrow and shouted for him to rise. The dead answered. They warned her, "Take the sword, and death will follow you." She took it anyway. She became a hero, a commander, and in the end, she died in battle, smiling, because her fate had always been written in iron. 55. Thorkel the Tall, the giant who fought for both sides. He was nearly 7 feet tall, a warrior so skilled, even kings hesitated to face him. Thorkel led the legendary Jomsvikings, a band of mercenaries feared across the North Sea. He raided England, then fought for England, then raided it again. He switched sides when it suited him, not out of cowardice, but strategy. He fought under King Nut, then against him, then with him again. His loyalty belonged to no throne, only to victory. And yet, in old age, he retired quietly, lived near the sea, taught children how to throw spears. And when he died, it is said the land itself trembled slightly, as though it knew a giant had fallen. And now, the tales grow dim again. You are drifting further, beyond blades and oaths, past fire and ice, into a sleep soft as fog. You have walked with blood kings and curse bearers, with queens of fire and ghosts of warriors too great to stay buried. But they are gone now. Their shadows fade. Only the slow breath of night remains. You are not in danger. You are not alone. You are in the saga's final verse for now. Until it begins again.
Rest.
Let the silence take you. The axe is hung. The shield is at your feet. The long ship is moored. You are home. The North has not yet finished whispering. There are still more warriors to remember, men and women whose names echo faintly beneath the frost. Some were feared in their lifetimes. Others were feared only after death. All have left their mark, not in thunder, but in the hush between waves. Let us meet them now. 56. Freydis Eric's daughter, the sister who did not flee. She was the daughter of Eric the Red, sister to Leif Erikson. When they sailed to Vinland, the far lands of North America, she went too. But not as a settler. As a warrior. One night, while others slept, they were attacked by native warriors. The men ran. Freydis did not. Pregnant and barefoot, she grabbed a sword from the dead, bared her chest, and screamed into the dark. The attackers fled. Later tales say she took land by force, killed rivals in their sleep, and stood over their bodies with calm, steady breath. She returned to Greenland as a mother, but in her eyes, always, was that fire. The one that does not go out. 57. Kettle Flatnose, the lord of the Western Isles. His beard was broad, his ships were fast, and his anger cold. Kettle ruled the Hebrides, the Western Isles of Scotland, where sea mists move like ghosts and cliffs rise like teeth. He fled Norway after King Harald tried to unite the Jarls under one crown. But Kettle would never kneel. He carved out a kingdom of stone and storm. They say he had the second sight, could speak to spirits, could read omens in the waves. He raised a son, Bjorn the Easterner, and a daughter who married a king. But Kettle preferred the sea. When he died, his ship was not burned. It was sunk, so he could rule below, forever. 58. Håkon Sigurdsson, the pagan lord in Christian times. While kings turned to crosses, Håkon remained Old Norse. He ruled Norway when conversions swept across the land, but he refused. He built temples to Thor, gave sacrifices to Odin, and forbade Christian preachers from entering his hall. Some feared him for it. Others followed him, hoping the gods of their fathers might still win. He held power with ruthless calm, had rivals drowned in barrels, burned farms, banished priests. But he was not without charm. He spoke softly, smiled often. And yet, those smiles never reached his eyes. When he was betrayed, he fled to a pigsty and hid. And there, the pagan lord met his end, not in battle, but in mud and silence. The gods did not answer. But perhaps they were listening. 59. Orkatla the Iron Weaver, the Quiet Fury. Her name is barely mentioned in sagas. But in the east of Iceland, they still speak of her. Orkatla was said to be quiet, always spinning wool, always watching. When raiders came to her village, her husband fell. Her son, too. She buried them with her own hands. Then, without a word, she left. Months later, her enemies began to disappear. One by one, slowly, always at night, always without a sound. She returned a year later, older, scarred, silent still. She never spoke of what she had done. But in the long winters, children are told, never lie, never steal, or Orkatla will return. The Iron Weaver, the quietest rage. 60. Ivar Vidfamne, the World Embracer. His name meant wide grasper. And he earned it. Ivar ruled Sweden, Denmark, parts of Norway, and more. His empire stretched like a shadow across the north. He came to power through betrayal, had his own daughter poisoned, married her daughter to a rival, then killed the rival. He moved like a chess player, always 3 steps ahead. But Ivar was not cruel for pleasure, only for purpose. He believed the world should have one ruler, and he thought perhaps it should be him. When he grew old, he walked into the sea. Some say he drowned himself. Others say the waves opened and welcomed him, because the sea, like the world, had always belonged to him. Now, the longhouse is quiet. The warriors are still. You have walked once more through the frostbitten past, where blades gleamed in moonlight and kings sat atop bones. But now they are quiet, So, very quiet. You are safe, as they never were. The danger has passed. Only rest remains. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts drift. The saga waits for nothing, but it will always wait for you. Close your eyes. Sleep is near. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 13, Shadows of the Silent, Echoes of the Forgotten. You might think the sagas are finished, but they never truly end. They rest and wait. Just as warriors once waited in forests, behind fjords, beneath sails, or beneath the ground. Their names might not be shouted anymore, but they are still there. When he was sentenced to death, he asked her for a strand of her hair to fix his broken bowstring. She refused, and so he died, fighting bravely but alone. And Hallgerd? She stood still, her eyes dry. Because some women are not queens. They are storms, and storms do not cry. 62. Eric the Slippery, the warrior who was never caught. He never ruled a kingdom, never wore a crown, but every jarl in the north knew his name. Because Eric was never where they expected. He'd raid a town at sunrise and be gone by morning mist. He'd fight 6 men alone, then vanish without a trail. He'd be declared dead in spring, only to raid again in winter. He wore no armor, only silence. Some said he had made a deal with Loki. Others said he was just lucky. But those who faced him never laughed again. Because nothing is more terrifying than the man you cannot catch. Too beautiful. Married 3 times. Each time tragedy followed her like a wolf. Her first husband slapped her. He was killed shortly after. Her second husband crossed her. He died, too. Then came Gunnar, a great warrior. He loved her and feared her. And now, in the hush of sleep, we hear them again. 61. Hallgerd Longlegs, the beauty with a blade behind her back. They said she was too tall. 63. Brynhilde the Flame Swan, the cursed shield maiden. Her story is tangled in legend. Some say she was a Valkyrie, banished from Asgard. Others say she was a mortal shield maiden, betrayed by magic. But all agree, she could fight better than any man and loved more deeply than any heart could hold. She loved Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, and was betrayed. So she ordered his death. And when he died, she built a pyre, walked into the flames, and followed him. Not out of weakness, but because her story could not survive without fire. To this day, swans on northern lakes are said to carry her name. Graceful, distant, and deadly if crossed. 64. Ulf the Quieter, the man who spoke to no one. He arrived one winter in a village on the edge of the world. Alone. Tall, hooded, never smiling. He helped no one, asked for nothing, slept near the edge of the forest. When raiders came, the villagers fled, except Ulf. He stood with an axe in each hand. When the smoke cleared, the raiders were dead. Ulf said nothing, just returned to his hut. They gave him a haul. He refused it. They gave him gold. He buried it. Only when he died did they find the runes carved into his walls. Spells of protection, names of the fallen, and one final line. I was not silent. I was listening. 65. Asa Ironheart, the queen without a crown. She never ruled officially, but every man who ruled near her asked her permission first. Asa was raised among warriors, taught to fight, taught to sew, taught to survive. When her husband died, she raised his sons into kings. When a neighboring chieftain insulted her, he vanished 3 weeks later. Some said she commanded a hidden band of shield maidens. Others said she used poison, but none dared ask. She walked with a staff, not a sword. But when she entered a hall, even the bravest warriors stood. She was called Ironheart not because she was cruel, but because nothing ever broke her. Not love, not war, not time. And now the embers are low. The breath of the Longhouse is barely there. You've wandered through shadowy forests and stood on blood-washed shores. You've heard of quiet women, cunning men, cursed lovers, and warriors who were forgotten until now. But the night is kind. The danger is far. Let go of the longship. Let go of the axe. Let the sagas rest, as you must too. Because no warrior fights forever. Not even in dreams. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 14. The Wolf's Bloodline and the Raven's Shadow. Sleep is near, and yet the sagas drift on, deep into the dark where truth and myth blur like mist over fjords. These were not always the loudest warriors, nor the most famous. But they were the ones you remembered long after the fire died. The ones who lingered in dreams. Let us meet them now. 66. Ragnhild the Seer, the one who dreamed of kings. They said she saw the future in her sleep. Ragnhild was no warrior, and yet every warrior came to her door. Even kings. She spoke little. But when she did, her words twisted through time like wind over water. She foresaw Harald Fairhair before he was born. She named him the golden tree, whose roots shall split the stone. She raised sons and grandsons who became rulers. But she herself was never crowned. She simply sat at her loom, weaving and waiting. And when she died, a raven was seen circling above her house for 3 days. Because even the birds remembered her. And still do. 67. Bjorn Ketilsson, the reluctant berserker. They say rage lived in his blood, passed down from his father Kettle Flatnose. But Bjorn didn't want it. He lived quietly in Iceland, herding sheep, telling stories, drinking slowly. Until one winter, a band of outlaws came. They stole from his neighbors, burned barns,
Laughed.
Bjorn said nothing, until they touched his daughter. Then the rage came. He killed them all. With his hands. With his teeth. With old anger that had never cooled. He returned to his farm, covered in blood, and sat down by the fire. He never raised a weapon again. Because the rage had gone quiet. But not gone. Never gone. 68. Thora of the Black Hilt, the blade hidden in linen. Thora was born into a peaceful house. But she watched. And learned. She stitched her own dress with hidden iron plates. Lined the hem with sharp bronze wire. Carried a small dagger always in her sleeve. She married a man twice her age. He beat her. Then vanished.
People asked.
She smiled. She remarried. Then again. Each time, her husbands died mysteriously, robbers, fires, accidents. And yet Thora's home remained perfect. Her garden flourished. Her children grew strong. Some say she served vengeance, not gods. Others say she was a goddess in disguise. But no one dared accuse her, because Thora only smiled. And her smile was sharper than steel. 69. Armid the Half-Silent, the warrior who spoke in battle only. He was born mute in one ear. Raised by wolves, some said. He never laughed, never sang, and never spoke outside battle. But in the chaos of war, his voice thundered. He shouted commands, threats, curses, prayers, all in a single breathless storm. After battle, he returned to silence. Once, a jarl asked why he would not speak. Armid looked at him, then turned away. He died at sea, his ship never found. But sometimes, sailors on the northern wind swear they hear a voice, a battle cry with no army. Only the sea listens. And the sea remembers. 70. Ursa the Black-Winged, the raven's daughter. She wore black feathers in her braid. Claimed to be the daughter of a raven. Raised by her grandmother in a forest of frost and silence, Ursa learned to hunt before she could walk. She joined a war band of men. Fought better than any of them. When a king tried to wed her by force, she said nothing. That night, his keep burned. Only bones were left. She vanished for a time. Then returned with 30 ships, each sail painted with a raven. She took no throne. Claimed no land. Just moved from coast to coast like storm clouds. And when she passed, it is said the sky rained feathers. Black as ink. Soft as night. And now, the saga curls gently like smoke. You've wandered again through shadowed pastures, through forests thick with silence, and across waves that remember the names the world has forgotten. You are safe. You are warm. You are at peace. Let the warriors return to rest. Let their names drift gently into your dreams. No axe is drawn. No shield is needed. You are far from battle now. And the longhouse breathes quietly, as you do, the most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 15, Oaths in Blood, Names in Frost. Sleep walks beside us now, soft-footed and patient. But still, the tales stir in the shadows, in the cracks between memory and myth. These warriors did not all seek glory. Some sought peace, others vengeance. But all were remembered, not with cheers, but with chills. 71. Rafn the Hollow-Eyed, the one who saw too much. Rafn was not born strange, but he became strange. After his first raid, when he was only 16, he returned different. Quiet.
Pale.
He stopped sleeping, stopped speaking. He sat by the sea and stared into the dark water, murmuring names no one knew. Some believed he had seen something out there, something not meant for men. In battle, he fought with eerie calm, never flinching, never blinking. They say he never closed his eyes again. He was found one morning sitting upright, dead, with a raven perched on his shoulder. And yet his eyes were still open, still watching. 72. Svala Knott's daughter, the Oath Keeper. Svala was born in a fishing village. Her hands were always tying knots, ropes, nets, hair. But the tightest knots were the ones in her heart. When her brother was murdered, she made an oath. I will not rest until his killer kneels. It took her 10 winters. She crossed fjords, challenged chieftains, traded fish for information, silver for silence. When she found him, he begged. She said nothing, and kept her oath. Then she returned home, tied her braids into a single long knot, and never cut them again, because her promise had been fulfilled. And some knots should never come loose. 73. Eirik Bloody Hand, the Jarl with no mercy. Too proud. He ruled the north coast with iron will and iron hands. Both his palms were covered in scars, forever red from battle. He demanded loyalty, not love. He once burned a village, because a boy there failed to bow. But his people obeyed him, not because they feared death, but because they feared dishonor. He led every raid himself. Never retreated, never mourned. When a rival cursed him to his face, Eirik tore the man's heart out and held it skyward. Then calmly sat to eat. He died in his hall, sitting on his throne alone. And his hands, still red. Not with fresh blood, just memory. 74. Brynjar of the Storm, the thunder who walked. Wherever Brynjar went, thunder followed. It rained when he was born. A gale struck his wedding. Snow fell in summer when he raised his sword. His warband believed he was Thor's chosen. Others believed he was Thor. He was tall as 2 men and swung a hammer instead of a blade. When he laughed, men wept. When he roared, enemies dropped their shields. He didn't die in battle. He simply walked into the sea during a storm and vanished beneath the waves. The rain stopped the moment he was gone. But sometimes, when thunder echoes across the fjord, people say, he walks again. 75. Gudrun the Pale, the woman who refused the world. She was born during a famine. Her skin was as white as birch bark. Her hair, silver even as a child.
People said she was cursed.
Others said she was a spirit, not flesh. She lived alone by the cliffs, weaving grave clothes. Warriors would visit her before raids, asking for blessings. She would touch their foreheads, whisper words no one understood. Some never returned. Others returned untouched by harm. She never took silver, never spoke of her past. When asked her age, she said only, older than the wind. She vanished one winter night. All that was left was her loom, still warm, still humming. And now, the world outside has fallen away. There is only warmth, only breath, only quiet. The warriors are at rest now, their blades sheathed, their oaths fulfilled, their names whispered softly on the wind that no longer stirs. You have walked far with them, but now your eyes may close. No axe in hand, no fear in heart, only calm, only stillness, only sleep. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 16, Ghosts of Ice, Blood of Stone. The legends do not end. They stretch onward, like the long northern nights, across time, across tide, across sleep. These were not always the greatest warriors, but they were the ones who could not be forgotten. 76. Fridas Eric's daughter, the flame that would not flicker. She was the daughter of Eric the Red, and like her father, her blood ran hot, too hot for the cold world around her. Fridas sailed with the men to Vinland, the wild lands across the sea. She gave birth in the snow, heard war cries as the baby nursed, and when the men ran from battle, she stood, bare-breasted, sword raised, shrieking like a storm. The enemy fled, not from steel, but from something older, darker, rage made flesh. She lived long after that, but no one dared cross her, because she did not need armor. She was armor. 77. Jorn Skulsinger, the bard of the battlefield. Jorn sang to his enemies as he cut them down. He was a skald, yes, but also a killer, with a voice as cold as bone. He wrote no verses in halls, nor sat by fires. He saved his songs for the edge of the blade. Each warrior he slew, he named in song. He sang their names so they would not vanish. And he carved runes in trees to mark where they fell. Some mocked him, until he sang their names, too. One day, he disappeared into a fog. But if you pass through certain woods, you might still hear his voice, listing names you do not know, but soon might. 78. Helga the Shieldless, the one who never blocked. They offered her a shield. She refused it. If I must stop a blade, she said, I am already too late. She fought with speed, not strength. Never waited. Never hesitated. She trained by dodging falling snow, by walking barefoot on blades of ice. No enemy ever landed a blow. But her own people feared her calm, like water frozen too smooth. They said she moved like a ghost, like fate. And when she died, her body bore no scars. Only silence. Only a face at peace. As though death had offered her a shield, and she had refused that, too. 79. Skari of the Deep, the man who never surfaced. He came from the sea. Or so they said. He appeared after storms, soaking, silent, with kelp in his beard and salt on his brow. He never spoke of a home. Never spoke at all. But when the tide was high and the wind cruel, he walked inland, barefoot, dripping. Villagers locked their doors, because Skari brought vengeance. For sailors drowned, for gods forgotten, for wrongs done near water. When the seas were calm, he slept. When they roared, he rose. Then one day he walked into the waves and never returned. But fishermen still say, he is down there, waiting. 80. Thorgest the Fireless, the last warm heart. He was the last to carry the old ways. Before the churches, before the crosses, he told stories of gods who laughed, wept, and punished without mercy. But he never burned temples, never killed priests. He simply refused to kneel. He warmed his hall with stories, not fire. People came to listen, even those who had turned away from the old gods, because his voice still held the heat of ancient days. And when he died, the villagers built a cairn of stones over him, not to bury him, but to weigh down his memories so they would not drift away. And now, the sagas soften. The warriors retreat into shadow.
You are far from battle now.
You are close to stillness. The world is heavy with sleep. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts fade. Let the long house cradle you, as if you too were wrapped in furs beneath a roof of snow and stars. Tomorrow, there will be more names, more shadows, more legends. But tonight, the sword is sheathed. The sea is calm, and you are safe. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 17, Cold Names and Forgotten Fires. Time moves slowly in the north. Stories pass like snowflakes, silent, soft, endless. And though many of the loudest voices have gone, some still whisper through the wood smoke. These are their stories. 81. Rolf the Rootless, the wanderer without a grave. Rolf was tall and thin, with eyes like fog on the fjord. He never stayed long, never returned to the same village twice. They say he was cursed, bound never to rest, never to own land, never to love. He walked the coasts with a walking stick carved from driftwood and a knife made from the bone of a whale. He helped the old. He fed the lost. But when asked his name, he only said, "The sea remembers me." He died during a harsh winter, but no one could find his body. Only footprints in the snow, leading toward the cliffs. And then nothing. 82. Brynhild the axe dancer, who moved like wind. Brynhild never walked, she glided. She trained by the river, where the current was strong and never still. She watched the ripples. She mimicked their motion. Her axe moved like water. When enemies saw her, they laughed. Until they bled. She never needed armor. Never used a shield. She wore only a long cloak of green and carried an axe with no name. When battle came, she spun. And when battle ended, there was silence where she had stood. One day, her axe was found buried in a tree near the mountains. But Brynhild was gone. Perhaps she danced into the forest and never stopped. 83. Olaf Sipbeard, the one who burned but did not break. They called him Sipbeard not in jest, but in honor. His hall was burned by his own brother during a raid. His family gone. His land stolen. But Olaf survived, and never sought revenge in haste. He spent 10 winters rebuilding his home with his bare hands, each log carved with runes for strength. He grew older. Then, one spring morning, he walked into his brother's hall with no army, no shield, just an old axe and a slow breath. And when he left, the hall was silent and no one followed. Olaf returned to his new home, sat by the fire, and smiled for the first time in 20 years. 84. Asa Ravencloak, the one who waited in the dark. Asa was never seen by sunlight. She walked only at dusk, spoke only in whispers. She wore a cloak of black feathers, stitched together from every raven that had died in her village. They said she spoke with the dead, that she could call the spirits of slain warriors to fight again. No one dared test her. One year, during a great famine, men tried to rob her. They never reached her door. Their bones were found later, arranged in the shape of a raven's wings. Asa left no descendants, no grave, only feathers, and cold air when you pass her path. 85. Halstein the Slow, who killed without rushing. They mocked him. Slow hands, slow feet, slow speech. But Halstein watched. He listened. And while others rushed into war, he waited. He struck once. Cleanly. He never wasted motion. He never missed. His axe was heavy, not built for speed, but for certainty. He became feared. Not because he killed many, but because he never needed to kill twice. And when he grew old, he built a bench overlooking the sea. He sat there each morning and spoke to no one. Because sometimes the most terrifying warrior is the one who no longer needs to prove anything. And now, again, the world grows still. The past returns to slumber, and your breath settles like snow upon the ground. You are far from axes and iron. You are wrapped in warmth, in quiet. The warriors are gone. The sea is asleep, and your story tonight has found its calm. Sleep now. There will be more sagas, whispered slowly, when the moon returns. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 18, Blades of Silence, Shadows and Snow. Long ago, when gods walked behind the mountains and the sea still listened, there lived Vikings whose names chilled the wind. Their legends were not shouted, but whispered. We tell their stories now, gently, so that you may drift into sleep while the north remembers. Sigurd Sikelai, the man who saw backwards. Sigurd had one eye. The other, they said, looked into the past. It was clouded, silver, and still, but not blind. He saw things others could not. His comrades swore he knew where an enemy had come from, what they'd done, who they'd betrayed. He never spoke much, but in battle, he would pause, just a moment, and turn his head slightly, as though watching something that had already happened. Then he would strike. Always where it mattered. He died on a hilltop, smiling at the sky. Some say he saw his own death coming, and accepted it like an old friend. 87. Astrid Dead Smile, the woman who never blinked. Astrid had a face like stone, smooth, silent, unchanging. She never laughed, never frowned, but her mouth held the smallest curve, as if something amused her that no one else could see. She was deadly with knives. Kept them hidden in her sleeves, in her boots, in her braid. People feared her because she never shouted, never cursed. She simply stepped forward, and you were already bleeding. Some thought she could not feel. But one winter, she vanished after placing a carved figure, a child holding a fox, on her windowsill. No one ever found her again. Only that soft wooden toy. And her quiet smile. 88. Eric Wirmskin, the one who dressed in legends. Eric wore a cloak made from the skin of a serpent. Not a normal snake, no. They said he hunted the great sea Wirm of the northern deeps. Sailed for weeks through frozen fog until he found it sleeping on a glacier. He came back alone. His cloak glistened with scales that shimmered red and green and blue in the firelight. He never removed it. Some thought it gave him power. Others said it poisoned him slowly. He didn't care. He fought like the sea, cold, deep, and unstoppable. And when he finally sank into death, the cloak vanished too, as if it had only ever been a story. 89. Ylva Boneteller, who knew when you'd die. She was born during a wolf moon.
Her hair was white even as a child.
Her voice soft as falling ash. People brought her bones, animal, human, old, new. She would shake them in a carved bowl and listen. Then speak. Not of the past. Not of fortunes. Only of endings.
How they would die. When. Where.
Sometimes she said nothing. Only closed the bowl and turned away. Those people always died soon. She wore a necklace of teeth. Not trophies, reminders. When asked if she feared death, she said, "Why fear something you already know by name?" 90. Leif the Lull, the warrior who put armies to sleep. He never roared. He never barked commands. Leif spoke in a low voice, calm as a slow tide. He carried a black axe and wore no helm. His presence alone quieted his men, calmed the chaos of war. He was not the strongest, nor the fastest, but wherever he walked, silence followed. He once stood alone before 50 men, and spoke softly, "You don't want this." They laid down their weapons, not out of fear, but because it felt easier. He died in his sleep by a quiet brook, and was buried beneath moss and pine, where even the birds do not sing. And now, the tale has grown heavy with snow. The night has deepened. You have wandered far from fear and fire. There are no more blades near you now. No raids. No cries. Only the hush of old wind through old trees. The warriors are gone. Their names remain. But tonight they rest. And so may you. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 19, Steel and Silence, names lost to frost. There are names history remembers loudly, and others remembered only in the hush between footsteps. Let us listen for those names now. 91. Svala Iceblood, the woman who could not burn. Svala was born in a village that burned. Her mother carried her through smoke and ash, wrapped in wet cloth. Flames licked at her, but never left a mark. She grew quiet,
Pale. Still.
no one saw her run, or shout, or even raise her voice. But in battle, she was like winter itself, unrelenting, cold, patient. She fought without heat, without hatred, only purpose. Her enemies said her touch felt like snow on open wounds. She disappeared during a blizzard one year. No one found her body, only frozen footprints leading into the storm, and nothing else. 92. Sten Hollowhand, the man who felt no pain. Sten lost his right hand as a boy, bitten off by a wolf. But he didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply stared at the stump and said, "That's done then." He tied it with his belt and walked home. Years later, he carved a hand from wood hollow inside, filled with small stones. In battle, it made a sound like bones rattling. He became a legend, not because of strength, but because he never flinched. He said pain was a guest, and he'd stopped answering the door. 93. Carrie the Mute, the one who fought without a word. No one ever heard Carrie speak. Not once. She joined war bands without asking, fought without orders, left without goodbyes. But her silence was not empty. It was solid, unshakable. She used two short blades, always moving, never still, never loud. Some say she took a vow to honor a brother who died crying out in fear. Others say she just hated the sound of war. She was last seen on a hill, wiping her blades clean, and then vanished. Some think she still walks the roads, unseen, silently watching. 94. Torgrim Duskskin, the one who faded before he fell. Torgrim was old even when he was young. His skin dry, cracked, like the bark of a frost-killed tree. He spoke in riddles. He claimed to have seen Odin once, in the shadow of a raven's wings. He walked barefoot, even in snow. People thought he was mad. But when war came, Torgrim stood. His enemies laughed until he moved. His blade slow, deliberate, perfect. Every cut was placed like writing on stone. He was never wounded. But one day, he sat by a river and began to hum. And then, slowly, he turned to dust. Gone with the wind. 95. Dissa Nightthread, the weaver of last rites. Dissa never held a sword. But all feared her. She was a weaver, a seeress, a speaker to the dead. When a warrior died, she wove their story into a cloak, thread by thread. Those cloaks were burned with their bodies. And it was said that if she left a thread unwoven, the spirit would wander. Once, a cruel warlord demanded she leave him out of her rights. He died months later, screaming, chased by ghosts no one could see. Dissa wove nothing for herself. But when she passed, the village women wove a single black ribbon and tied it to the tallest tree. It still flutters there, even in windless winters. And now, your eyes are heavy. The cold has softened. The longhouse walls breathe slowly with you. No blades here. Only names. Only echoes.
Sleep now.
There is peace tonight. Even the terrifying rest in the end. The saga will wait until morning. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 20. Those who walked beyond fear. There were warriors known for rage. Others for cunning. And then there were those whose stories weren't told in great halls, but whispered by the old, late at night, when the storms howled and the lamps burned low. These are their stories. 96. Fenja the Far Gone, the one who never looked back. Fenja left home at 15. No one knew why. She took no pack, no horse, only a small hammer carved from stone and a necklace of pine beads.
She walked east.
Then further east. She crossed forests, rivers, mountain, but always moved forward. Her name spread across the lands, not because of great battles, but because no one could stop her. She refused shelter, refused praise, refused to turn around. They say she was seeking something. Some say it was vengeance. Others say it was silence. But most believe she had already died once and was walking through the world just to find the end again. 97. Baldur Saltblood, the man who slept in the sea. He was found as a baby, floating in a wooden bowl along the fjord. No one knew where he came from. He was raised by fishermen, quiet and strange. He would wade into the sea at night and stay underwater for hours. Some believed he belonged to Ran, the sea goddess. He never denied it. He grew tall, broad, and unshakable, carried a harpoon longer than a man. He wore sea glass around his neck and never dried the salt from his skin. He fought only to protect. But when a pirate fleet threatened his village, Baldur vanished into the tide. In the morning, the pirate ships were broken on the shore, torn open like driftwood. And Baldur was never seen again. 98. Ursa Ashtung, the one who spoke and fire followed. Ursa was small, quiet. She did not raise her voice because she didn't need to. When she told stories, fires flared without wood. When she sang, wolves sat still to listen. They say she once ended a blood feud by whispering a single word. No one remembers the word, but no one died after it. She carried no weapon, only a pouch of ash. She would press it to the lips of the dead, so they wouldn't speak in the next life. One day, a warlord threatened her with 50 men. She spoke just 3 words, and the wind rose, and the men fled into madness. She left that night barefoot, and only her footprints burned. 99. Hurled the hollow, the warrior with nothing left. They said he lost his wife, then his sons, then his land. He did not cry. He did not rage. He simply took up a sword and began walking. He did not eat much. He did not sleep. But wherever he went, war followed. Not because he sought it, but because the gods seemed to place it in front of him. He fought as if he had already fallen. He never spoke of home, because there was none. He was not feared because of anger or strength, but because he had nothing left to lose. He vanished in spring, and on a hill where flowers bloomed, a sword was found thrust deep in the earth, still warm to the touch. 100. Signy Quietfire, the last name in the saga. She was born when the old ways were dying, when the gods grew quiet and the churches grew loud. But Signy didn't belong to one world or the other. She walked between them, carried a knife on one side of her belt, a cross on the other. She listened more than she spoke. She fought when she must, but spared when she could. And when her village was torn between war and peace, she stood alone on the bridge between them, and said, "If I fall, let no one pass." No one dared challenge her, not because she was strongest, but because she believed in something deeper than steel. She lived long, died old, and her grave is unmarked. But they say that in certain villages, when snow falls soft and evenly, the wind carries a hush and a warmth that was hers. And now, dear one, we have reached the 100th name. The longhouse is still. Your eyes are heavy. The warriors rest. The stories sleep. But you are still breathing in the calm of ancient names. There are more stories. Always more. But for now, you may rest in peace. Let the past keep its watch. You are safe. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 21, Forgotten Blades, Echoes in the Ice. Some names are carved on stones. Others are carved on the wind. Tonight, we speak of those whose stories were nearly lost, but who still live in the hush between waves, in the crack of frost underfoot, and in dreams. 101. Viga Thorin, the shield maiden who stood for the storm. Thorin's name meant battle, and battle followed her, not because she chased it, but because she stood still when it came. She carried a round shield painted with waves and stars. People said she could read the sky like a scroll. Before a raid, she would sit on the shore, whispering to the sea. Some said she spoke to Njord, the god of the ocean. Others said she simply listened well. In the siege of Kalfravik, she alone held the northern gate. When the battle ended, her shield had 30 notches, but she had not moved an inch. After that, she vanished. The gate she guarded still stands, untouched by time. 102. Holler Raveneye, who dreamed what would be. Holler had eyes black as raven's feathers. He did not smile often, but he was kind. He kept a flock of birds that followed his longship wherever he sailed. He said they showed him the world, not as it was, but as it could be. He drew maps with rivers that didn't exist yet, marked villages not yet built. In battle, he stood aside, whispered to his birds, and his allies moved as though guided by fate. He died at sea. But when the waves calmed, ravens circled overhead for 3 days, not crying, just watching. 103. Brynhild Emberhair, the flame that walked. Brynhild was born during a fire. Her home, a hall of wood, burned to ash the night she arrived. But she lived. Her hair was red as coals. Her eyes, glowing gold in the dark. She was not loud, but when she walked into the great halls, fires stirred, even if cold. She carried a curved blade, forged in heat no one could explain. In war, her enemies claimed their swords went dull when striking her. One chieftain said she stared into him, and his courage turned to smoke. She lived long, but never aged. And still, his maps proved true years later. And one day, during the coldest winter, she simply walked into the fire pit, and the flames rose like a crown. 104. Skari Driftbone, who rode the ice. Skari was a man of the far north, where the sea freezes and the stars speak only in whispers. He wore bone armor, crafted from beasts long dead. He never spoke unless spoken to. But when storms came, he sang low songs to the ice. He moved across frozen lakes faster than horses. People claimed he could skate across oceans in the night. In war, he moved with eerie stillness, never slipping, never rushing. When his village was trapped by a glacier wall, Skari went out alone. He returned with a crack in the ice behind him, and the glacier parted within a day.
No one knows how.
But they built a shrine of antler and driftwood where he stood, and it never melts. 105. Ellen of the Wolves, the one who spoke to the pack. Ellen was raised in the woods. She spoke little, but animals followed her. But because of the silence that came just before her, followed by the sound of paws. Her cloak was made of gray fur, but never taken from a kill. The wolves gave it. She once stopped a war between two clans by walking between them, surrounded by 6 wolves. No one dared raise a hand. She died an old woman, in the forest where she was born. They say the wolves howled for her for 7 nights, and then were never seen again. And now, the fire crackles softer. The night has thickened. The longhouse breathes with you. The tale lingers like smoke, faint, warm, fading slowly. The warriors are gone once more. You remain, wrapped in blankets, wrapped in story, wrapped in peace.
Sleep now.
The saga will return when the stars call your name again. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 22. The cold-blooded and the kind. Not all terrifying warriors are cruel, and not all kind souls are safe. Some wield steel for love, others for loss. But all are remembered, especially on quiet nights like this. 106. Freydis the Still-Hearted, who never blinked. Freydis was not large. She wore no armor. She kept her blonde hair tied with twine, and her fingers stained from herbs. But when a raiding party broke through the village gate, she did not run. She stood at the door of the healing hut, holding only a kitchen knife. The invaders laughed. But when they stepped forward, she did not blink. Not once. One by one they hesitated. One by one they turned, and one by one they fled, because they said her eyes saw past death. That night, her name was whispered not in anger, nor in praise,
but in fear.
107. Jarn of the Low Voice, the one who spoke after battle. Jarn was a tall man, broad-shouldered, but quiet. He did not raise his voice in council. He did not cheer after victory. He waited, and when the noise was done, he spoke.
Softly, calmly,
always the truth. He walked the battlefield after the blood was spilled. He closed the eyes of the dead, both friend and foe. He buried them when no one else would. Warriors called him grim, called him cursed, but they also followed him because they knew Jarn never lied, not with his mouth. Not with his blade. And when Jarn stopped speaking one day, people listened harder than ever, because the silence was full. 108. Runa Fireeyes, the girl who saw the end. She was no older than 15 when her name began to spread. Born under an eclipse. Eyes too bright. Almost glowing. She could see things that hadn't happened yet. She told a warrior not to ride west. He laughed. He never returned. She warned a village of a flood. They moved uphill. The flood came. Some said she was touched by the gods. Others said she was a god, sent in flesh. But Runa never asked for worship, only that people listen. She vanished one spring, left only a scroll, on it a map, of lands no one had ever seen.
Yet.
109. Kettle Snowwalk, whose boots never left tracks. Kettle was born during the longest winter in living memory. His first steps were in snow up to his waist. But he never sank, never slipped, and he never left prints. He became a scout, a tracker, a silent shadow. Enemy warriors swore they were alone, until it was too late. He would appear from behind trees, from over ridges, from beside frozen rivers. Strike once, then vanish again. Some said he was not real, a myth, but his arrows were real enough. Found in the backs of many who thought themselves safe. He left behind no children, no wife, no story carved in stone, just snow, untouched. 110. Hala, 3 times born, the one who refused to die. The first time she was thought dead, she was 6. Fell into icy water. Came back with blue lips and breath that steamed like a forge. The second time, a sword pierced her belly. She stood again before the wound had stopped bleeding. The third time, a fall from a cliff. People began to whisper that she was chosen or cursed. She never answered, only fought harder. She bore scars like medals. And when people asked how she lived through it all, she said, because the saga isn't finished. And even now, no one has seen her die, only disappear. And now, the longhouse grows warmer with each breath. The fire fades lower. You are not alone. The stories watch over you, quiet and calm, and your body sinks deeper into stillness.
Sleep now.
The warriors will wait. They always do. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 23. Those who came from the edge of the world. The North had many names, and many more forgotten. Some warriors came from places beyond the maps. From the ends of fjords. From forests too deep for the sun. From islands that only appear in fog. But their stories found their way to the fire. And now to you. 111. Ulfr the Tide, who chose his chains. Ulfr was a berserker once. His rage, known across 5 kingdoms. But one day, he walked into a village, carrying chains. He handed them to the chieftain, and asked to be bound. Not for punishment, but for peace.
For 5 years, he wore chains of iron.
He tended sheep, built walls, said little. But when raiders came and the village panicked, Ulfr snapped the chains with a breath. And his old fury returned. Not wild, not blind, but sharp, cold, and clean. The raiders were gone before morning. Ulfr bound himself again, and returned to his sheep. 112. Skuld Moonface, who spoke to the tides. Skuld never spoke to people, only to water. She was pale, slender, moved like smoke. She lived in a stone hut by the shore, where waves curled close but never touched her feet. Sailors came to her before voyages. They would wait outside her hut until nightfall. Then she would emerge, draw a circle in the sand, whisper to the moon, and answer with one word: go,
or
stay. Those who listened lived. Those who didn't became driftwood. When she died, the sea rose for 3 days and lapped against her door, then stopped, as if saying goodbye. 113. Gunnar of the Hollow Tree, the boy who became a forest. Gunnar was orphaned in a raid. He was 7. He ran into the woods and didn't come out for 20 years. People saw him from time to time, climbing trees, feeding wolves, whistling to owls. He returned as a man with bark-bound boots and moss in his hair. He spoke slowly, like wind through branches. When war came to the forest, he did not fight in armor. He used vines, thorns, traps that made men vanish. The invaders fled, said the trees were alive. They were, because Gunnar had taught them how to hunt. He vanished again. But some say if you walk deep enough into the pines, he walks beside you. 114. Asa Bonesinger, the one who played for the dead. Asa carried no sword, only a harp made from driftwood and bone. She walked from village to village, in the dead of winter, always after a battle. She played by the burial mounds. Low, strange melodies. Some said her music kept the dead asleep. Others said it helped them cross the sea to the next world. Her hands were always cold. Her eyes never blinked when she played. One chieftain tried to stop her, thinking her cursed. or both. He never woke the next morning. No wounds. No marks. Only a single harp string placed across his chest. Asa was never seen again. But sometimes in the deep snow, you hear her music still. 115. Jorund Stoneback, who could not be moved. Jorund was a simple man.
He fished.
He carved wooden toys. He loved to hum. But when an army came to claim his island, he stood in the only pass between the cliffs. No shield. No armor. Only a thick coat and a hammer. The invaders charged. But Jorund did not move. And they broke. One by one. Not because he was violent, but because he was still. Still as a mountain. Still as winter. When it ended, the pass was filled with broken spears, but Jorund still stood. He returned home, fed his chickens, and hummed. His island was never attacked again. No one dared. And now, the stories settle like snow. Your breath is slow. Your mind is soft. The fire flickers gently. Outside, the stars are listening. Inside, you are safe.
Sleep now.
And dream of distant warriors whose names live on, not through battle cries, but through quiet, endless memory. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 24. The Silent Ones and the Sound of Their Absence. Some warriors are loud like thunder, but others are so quiet, their silence becomes a weapon. A presence so powerful, even the wind bends around them. Tonight, we speak of those you almost never heard coming, because they didn't need to be heard. 116. Thora of the Black Snow, who walked between storms. Thora was born during a blizzard that never ended. Not for 3 days. Not even the ravens flew. Her mother said she never cried. Not once. Only stared out the hut with eyes like storm clouds. As a girl, Thora could walk through snowdrifts without leaving prints. They said she was made of ice and shadow. She hunted wolves with her bare hands. She once crossed a frozen lake in the dark and came back with fish and firewood, smiling faintly. When war came to her village, she didn't scream. She simply walked into the wind, where the enemy waited. When morning came, no one stood on the other side. Only tracks. And blood.
And silence.
117. Eric Ashblood, the one who carried fire in his veins. Eric was small, quiet, unassuming. He tended fires, gathered coals, sat near the hearth while the warriors talked. But one night, invaders burned his village, and something inside him cracked. Eric picked up a smoldering brand, walked into the woods. The next day, the invaders were found, burned. No wounds, no blades, just scorched. Some said Eric learned magic from the fire. Others said rage had turned his blood to smoke. He never spoke of it. He simply rebuilt the fire pit, kept it lit, kept it safe, and the flames never went out again. 118. Brynjar of the Hollow Ship, who sailed without wind. Brynjar built a boat with no sail, no oars, just smooth wood, carved in strange curves, whisper thin.
People laughed.
But then he launched it.
And it moved.
Across still water. Through fog. Through ice. He said nothing, only looked at the sky and touched the hull like it was alive. He disappeared for 7 years. Returned with scars and stories he never told. But after that, storms parted for him. Fish swam to him. And when the sea froze around other ships, his always found open water. He vanished again one autumn. His ship was found, years later, empty, floating gently, still moving, without wind. 119. Liv the Pale Wolf, the one who came from the ice. Liv was not born. She was found, in the snow, beneath a wolf's body, wrapped in its warmth, still alive. She grew with white hair and pale skin. The villagers feared her, but wolves came to her in silence. She wore no shoes in the cold, felt no pain in frost. When the warlord Ulfared Hand came to conquer the valley, he found Liv waiting, alone. She looked at him once. He dropped his sword. No one knows what she said. But Ulfr left, and never returned. They say Liv still lives in the northern pines. Older now, wiser, but unchanged, waiting. 120, Stigandr the Bell, whose steps marked doom. Stigandr was tall, always barefoot. He walked slowly with a limp, but when you heard his step, a heavy, dragging sound like a bell on the wind, you knew someone had wronged him. He never raised his voice. He never rushed. But he never stopped. One man who stole from Stigandr tried to flee across the sea. 3 months later, he was found hiding in a cave, mad with fear. Said he'd heard footsteps every night, and one morning, he was simply gone. Only a bell was left behind, still ringing. No one ever crossed Stigandr after that. He died old, in silence.
And now,
You rest again, wrapped in blankets, wrapped in story, wrapped in the deep comfort of the long, slow past. These names drift into dreams like driftwood on a quiet tide.
sleep.
The saga sleeps with you, but it will rise again. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 25. The ones the ravens remember. Long after the bones have crumbled, after the swords have rusted, the ravens remember. They circle the fields where warriors once stood. They perch on the stones that mark their names. And they whisper. Tonight, you hear what the ravens heard. 121. Dag the Duskborn, who walked in twilight. Dag was born as the sun set and clouds rolled in. No one saw his first breath, only felt it cold and still and silent. He lived in the edges of things. Not quite day, not quite night. Dag never wore armor. He never charged first into battle. But when the fighting had started, when the dust rose and the screams blurred, Dag would appear in the corner of your vision. And then you would fall. No one ever remembered how. Some said he used poison. Others said shadow. But it didn't matter. When Dag came, the sun dimmed, and the ravens circled sooner than usual. 122. Ingrid Salteyes, who never wept. Ingrid was raised on a sea-swept rock, where waves crashed louder than words. Her eyes were gray, flecked with white, like sea foam. She watched 5 brothers die in a raid. She did not weep. She carried a broken spear, never sharpened it, never cleaned the salt from it, because it wasn't for show. It was for remembering. When she walked into battle, she never screamed.
She didn't need to.
She stood still, waited,
Watched.
and when the moment came, struck only once. Always the right place, always the right time. The salt never left her eyes, and no one ever saw her blink. 123. Magnus Hollowhand, who let his blade decide. Magnus spoke to his sword, not like a madman, like an old friend. He carried it in cloth, never drew it unless he asked, "Shall we?" Most days, the blade stayed sleeping. But when it answered, when it sang, Magnus moved like thunder in the mountains. He never boasted, never bragged. When the fighting ended, he wrapped the blade again and whispered, "Thank you." He died in peace, alone, with the sword across his chest. But sometimes, the cloth stirs on its own, and the air grows cold. 124. Brynja the Needle, who sewed men to death. Brynja was a tailor's daughter. Small,
Thin.
her hands were delicate, her voice quiet. But she saw blood early, and learned to stitch wounds closed, and then later, to stitch enemies apart. She carried a curved blade no longer than a finger. She moved like thread through silk. One warrior said he didn't even feel the cut. Just warmth. Then cold. Then nothing. When others argued, Eirik listened. When others shouted, Eirik breathed. And when danger came, Eirik stepped forward. Just once. That was always enough. They say he struck only 5 times in his life. Each one changed history. One ended a feud. One saved a village. One silenced a tyrant. One opened a mountain path. And the last, no one knows. But the stars were brighter that night. Now the wind is soft. The world is slower. The names sink like stones into still water. Gone, but felt forever.
Sleep now.
You've heard enough for tonight. But the saga waits. Patient as snow. Steady as the tide. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 26. The fire beneath the frost. Some warriors blaze like torches. Others smolder for years before rising. And when they do, the frost cracks. These are the ones who waited. Not out of fear, but out of knowing. They knew the right moment. And it always came. 126. Fridas of the Ember Path, who smiled as the world burned. Fridas was a woodswoman. She gathered herbs, told stories to children, laughed often. But her village forgot what she had once been. Until raiders came. They burned homes, took what they pleased, laughed at her as she stood in the ashes. Fridas said nothing. She vanished into the woods. For 3 nights, nothing moved. On the 4th, the forest burned in a perfect circle around the raiders' camp. No one escaped. Only Fridas walked out, hands soot black, smile quiet, eyes calm. She went back to telling stories. But now they were afire, and none dared interrupt her. 127. Yari's stone teeth, who bit the earth. Yari had no weapon. He said they were too small. His teeth were cracked, his hands thick as oak roots. He ate raw bark, broke bones with his jaws. Once, when caught in a bear trap, he bit it apart. When a king demanded his loyalty, Yari said, "Bite me." The king laughed, but didn't laugh long. Yari didn't start battles.
He ended them.
By charging through walls and biting through shields. He died old, smiling, chewing a rock. They say the stone cracked first. 128. Solveig the Quiet Flame, who waited too long. Solveig was born under strange stars. She learned to fight, learned to speak, then chose silence. For 10 years, she watched others fight. She tended wounds, dug graves, cleaned blood, but said nothing, until the day her brother was struck down. Not in war, in betrayal. Solveig stood still, then finally spoke. 1. That was the number of lives she would take. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She walked, blade sheathed, until she reached the man who had done it. And when she unsheathed the sword, the wind stopped. He never even raised his hand. She whispered, 1, and was silent again. 129. Leaf Knucklefrost, who fought the cold with cold. Leaf hated fire. Always had. He said warmth made you forget how to survive. He slept outside, bathed in ice water, wore no gloves in the snow. His fists were scarred, but steady. He fought only with his hands. When enemies came, they thought him mad, until he met them bare-knuckled in the snow, while they slipped, fumbled, shivered. Leaf did not. He moved like winter wind, struck like falling hail. He once fought 5 men in a blizzard. When it cleared, only Leaf stood.
Shivering? No.
Smiling. 130. Svanhild the Last Light, who waited at the end. Svanhild lived at the farthest edge of the world, where the sun barely rose, where wolves outnumbered men. She carried no weapons, only a lantern, always lit. Travelers who saw it followed the glow and reached safety. But once, a warband came to take her land. They laughed at her lantern, mocked the light. She offered them warmth. They refused. So she placed the lantern on a post
And walked away.
The next morning, the warband was found, frozen in a ring around the light. No marks, no wounds, only frostbitten fear on their faces. And the lantern, still glowing. The story grows long. The names stretch out like stars. Endless, distant, but warm. You've heard more than most ever will. You've traveled through shadow and frost, through flame and silence. And now your eyes grow heavy. Your breath slows. And the warriors step away, into dream. Sleep. Let the saga continue in your mind, like footsteps in snow. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 27. Those who waited beyond the edge. Some warriors stood at the edge of the world, not because they were pushed there, but because they chose it. They waited in silence, past the mountains, past the cold, past the reach of kings. And when they moved, the world moved with them. 131. Ursa of the Deep Wind, who spoke only to the storm. Ursa lived on the cliffs where the wind howled louder than men. Her hair was white before age touched her. Her face was carved by sea air. She never spoke to people, only to the wind. She listened too. When storms gathered, she would walk to the edge, barefoot, and whisper. Sometimes the wind obeyed. Sometimes it roared back. But one winter, an army tried to cross the high path above her cliffs. Ursa went out alone. No weapons, no shield, just a voice that echoed into the gale. The storm arrived before the army reached her, and when it cleared, only wind remained. 132. Finn the Slow, who moved like stone. Finn was large,
broad,
strong, but he was slow, not clumsy, not dull, just deliberate. He said, "There is no rush to ruin." When others fought in flurries and noise, Finn waited,
watched,
moved once. And when he moved, things broke.
shields,
Walls.
spears, bones.
Once, he stood in the doorway of a hall while 30 men tried to enter. None got past him, because Finn only needed one step, one swing, one breath. Time bent around him because he refused to bend to time. 133. Thordis of the Sealed Mouth, who knew too much. Thordis was a seer's daughter. She was born with runes on her tongue. Her mother stitched her lips shut before she turned 5. Not out of cruelty, but mercy, because Thordis spoke truths no one wanted to hear. So she learned to write, to listen,
To watch.
and in silence, she became terrifying, because she always knew who would betray, who would fall, when winter would bite hardest. She only ever opened her mouth once. On a battlefield, she whispered one name. The enemy leader collapsed. Not from blade, not from wound, just from knowing what she said. 134. Jorund Ironbreath, who melted snow with his voice. Jorund was born during a volcanic winter. The sun was dim, the air was ash, and yet his breath steamed even in warmth. His voice was deep, too deep. It cracked stone. It scared wolves. It made the air waver. He used no war horn. He was one. Before a raid, Jorund would exhale once. That was enough. Enemy camps would scatter. Birds would vanish. And even steel would tremble in warrior hands. They say his lungs held the forge of Muspelheim, that he was not born but forged. He never denied it, just breathed. And the snow melted. 135. Alva Redveil, who never showed her face. Alva was always veiled in red silk. Even as a child, no one saw beneath it, not once. Some said her face was burned. Others said it was too beautiful to behold. But those who tried to lift her veil died. Instantly, Alva fought with short knives, fast and elegant, like silk fluttering in a storm. Her steps were light, her hands soft, but blood followed he. Kettle was always close to the ground. He never wore iron, only moss, bark, and bone. He didn't live in a longhouse, he lived in the soil. He dug tunnels with his bare hands, carved homes into hillsides, and listened to the roots. They said the earth itself warned him of danger. When enemies passed through his forests, they vanished. No blood, no bones, only footprints that led to nowhere. And sometimes, a faint, wet breath rising from the moss. Kettle's war cry was silence. His weapon was patience. And he was never seen unless he wanted to be. 137. Ira Flatgaze, who never looked away. Ira was a shield maiden with a strange stare. Eyes pale, almost colorless. She never blinked during battle. Ever. Even when blood splashed across her face, or flames rose around her. Her gaze stayed steady, fixed, and terrible. Some said her sight was a curse, that she had seen things no one should. But she said nothing. She only watched. When warriors met her eyes in combat, they froze. Their blades slowed. Their breath caught. Because they felt seen, not just as enemies, but as mortals. Small. Fragile. Ending. Ira never chased anyone. She just stood and looked. And they turned and ran. 138. Skagi the Nail, who could not be pulled free. Skagi was named for his stubbornness. No chain could hold him. No sword could make him fall. No king could make him kneel. He was captured 23 times. Escaped 23 times. Each time, more scars. More steel in his bones. And each time he came back harder, colder, quieter. When he fought, it wasn't rage, it was refusal. He didn't swing wildly. He planted his feet. And would not move. Men struck at him like waves against rock.
And he stood.
And stood.
And stood.
Until they broke. 139. Thora Whaleblood, who dragged ships to shore. Thora lived by the sea. She was strong, too strong. She once pulled a fishing boat through the ice with her bare hands. But she never bragged. Never boasted. Her village fed its children through winters because she pulled in food, wood, and stranded sailors. Until raiders came. They laughed at her size. Called her names. She said nothing. When they set sail again, their ship never reached open water. It was found later, dragged up on land, far from shore, hull splintered like driftwood. And Thora? Just standing beside it. Hair wet, eyes calm, like the tide had obeyed her. 140. Baldur Hollowheart, who felt nothing at all. Baldur was kind once, but something broke in him. No one knew when. He still smiled, still sang, but in battle no fear. No pain. No anger. Just nothing. He moved like a sleepwalker, untouched by the chaos around him. An arrow through the leg, he didn't flinch. A spear in his side, he pulled it out and walked on. When men screamed around him, Baldur simply looked. Not cruel, not cold, just gone. Some said his soul had left his body. Others said the gods had taken his heart to keep him alive. Whatever the truth, Baldur never died. He just walked away and never came back. The names fall like snow now.
Soft.
Endless. Each flake a warrior, forgotten, but felt. You are deep in the saga now. And the deeper you go, the quieter the world becomes. Let yourself rest. The fire is still warm. The snow is still falling. The story will still be here tomorrow. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 29. The silent strength, the final ones, the shadows in the mist. The most terrifying warriors were never the loudest. They did not roar. They did not boast. They whispered. They waited. They watched. And when the time came, they acted. And the world remembered. 141. Signy Driftvoice, who sang in the fog. No one knew where Signy came from. She walked out of the mist one evening, humming. Not loudly, barely above the wind. She carried no blade, no shield, just a small wooden flute. She played it before battle. And after. It was said that those who heard her tune would never hear anything again. Not steel, not cries, not the voice of their kin. They would wander, lost in fog, chasing a sound they could not grasp. Signy never fought, never touched a soul, but armies disbanded when she stood nearby, because her song was not for them. It was for what came after. 142. Bjorn the Door, who let no one pass.
Bjorn was not swift,
Nor clever,
nor poetic.
he was a door. That's what they called him. Because once he stood in your way, you stopped. He guarded bridges, gates, and tunnels. And in each battle, he chose his post and stayed there. Men tried to climb over him, crawl beneath, go around. They failed. Bjorn fought like a tree fights wind. He didn't move. The last thing many enemies saw was his quiet, steady face. Still as stone, calm as nightfall. And then, nothing. 143. Disabone Tally, who kept count in the dark. Dissa was a record keeper, a quiet girl with chalk-stained hands. She counted barrels,
Coins.
arrows,
Graves.
and one day, bodies. She began keeping a tally of every life taken in her village. Not in grief, not in revenge, just to remember. When raiders came, Dissa hid in the granary, listened.
Wrote.
When they came again, she was not there. But her tallies had grown longer, and the raiders began to vanish, one by one. Each body found with a chalk mark nearby, a number,
And a name.
until only silence remained. Dissa never stopped counting. Some say she still writes. 144. Rurik Blunteye, who could not see, but saw too much. Rurik lost his sight young. A fire, or a flash of God's wrath, no one knew. But he grew taller, stronger, stranger. He claimed he saw better now. Not light, but truth. He could sense fear before it rose. Could walk through a battlefield without touching a soul, until he struck. And when he struck, it was always the right man. The one holding the torch. The one whispering treachery. The one who smiled too wide. They said Rurik saw through skin. That he struck hearts, not flesh. And though he could not see her face, he always knew her name. 145. Helga never turned. Who faced every storm. Helga never turned her back. Not once. She was born during a tempest and stood facing the sea as a child. When others fled battle, Helga faced it. When walls fell behind her, she stood still, eyes forward. Even when her comrades died, she refused to step back. Helga walked only in one direction, toward danger,
Toward truth.
toward the horizon. They say she once stood against an avalanche and did not blink. The snow parted, because even the mountain knew. Helga never turned, does not fall. And now, your eyelids grow heavier, your breath slower. The warriors fade into the mist again. They have spoken, and now they sleep beside you in the snow of time. You're safe here, wrapped in their stories, their silence, their strength. The most terrifying Viking warriors in history, boring history for sleep. Part 30, the last of the lost, the ones who never left. There are warriors who vanished into snow, into myth, into mist. Not because they were weak, but because they were finished. And yet, sometimes you can still feel them in the hush between heartbeats. They are not remembered in songs, only in silence. 146. Egil of the Hollow Drum, who walked with thunder. Egil was born under a thundercloud. Even as a child, thunder followed him, slow, distant, but constant. He carried no blade, no axe, only a hollowed drum, made from whale skin and stormwood. That drum,